The courtroom smelled like floor wax and old wood. 30 men in leather cuts sat in the gallery behind a 17-year-old girl who weighed nothing compared to what she carried. Her boots were borrowed. Her jeans had a patch on the
What
left knee
happened to you?
she had sewn herself with fishing line.
No.
In her right
Who
hand,
did
she held a
this?
USB drive no bigger than her thumb. The federal judge looked down from the bench bifocals low on his nose and studied her the way a man studies something he cannot quite categorize. "Miss Dawson," he said, "do you understand that if your testimony is found to be false, you will face federal perjury charges?" Wren Dawson did not blink. "I understand," she said, "but if I stay quiet, he kills again." Silence hit the courtroom like a stone dropped into a well. Somewhere behind her, leather creaked as 30 iron wolves shifted in their seats. Somewhere across the aisle, a man in a gray suit stopped writing and looked up from his legal pad for the first time. 4 weeks earlier, Wren Dawson had been nobody. A runaway with frozen shoes and a torn bus ticket, and no reason to believe tomorrow would be different from today. 4 weeks earlier, she had been walking a highway in a snowstorm, and she had heard a man dying in a ditch. This is how it started. The snow came sideways on Interstate 90, 10 miles east of Billings, Montana, driven by a wind that had nothing between it and the Canadian border, but flat earth and frozen fences. The kind of wind that found the gaps in everything. Jacket seams, boot soles, the places inside a person where warmth goes to hide when there is not enough of it left. Wren walked the shoulder with her head down and her hood pulled low, watching her breath come out in short white bursts that the wind shredded before they got 6 inches from her face. The backpack on her shoulders was light. Everything she owned fit inside it. A rolled-up hoodie 2 sizes too small. A photograph of her little brother Caleb, 8 years old, grinning with syrup on his chin and 2 missing teeth. And a Greyhound bus ticket to Seattle that had been torn in half down the middle, the 2 pieces held together by a rubber band because she could not make herself throw them away. Her sneakers were soaked through. The left one had a split along the sole where water and snowmelt crept in with every step, turning her sock into a cold, wet compress against her skin. Her denim jacket was built for October in Spokane, not January on the high plains of Montana at 1 in the morning. The cold had stopped being an annoyance 2 hours ago. Now it was a presence, a thing with weight pressing into her ribs and her fingers and the backs of her ears like it intended to stay. She did not know exactly how long she had been walking. She had left the truck stop in Laurel around 11 after the night manager told her she could not sleep in the booth anymore. Before that, she had eaten half a gas station sandwich behind a dumpster, the only meal she had managed since yesterday morning. Before that, the ride from Spokane with a long-haul driver who talked about his daughter the whole way and dropped her at the Laurel exit with a $20 bill she tried to refuse, and he made her take. The 20 was in her pocket now. It felt like a small lie, like she was pretending to be someone who had money. Trucks passed her in the right lane every few minutes, big rigs hauling freight east toward Miles City and beyond. Their headlights swept across the snow, turned everything white and shadowless for a second, then left her in the dark again. Not one of them slowed. To them, she was a shape on the shoulder, a smudge of denim in backpack straps, a problem that belonged to somebody else. She had learned a long time ago that this was how the world worked. People saw what they wanted to see, and what they wanted to see was nothing. She kept her eyes on the road. One foot then the other, the way Miss Calloway at the group home used to say when Wren was 12 and too angry to sit still. "You cannot fix everything, Wren. You just keep moving." One step, then another. Miss Calloway had meant it about homework, about chores, about the system that kept sending her back to a house where her stepfather Lyle Purcell drank until the bottles ran out and then found something small and alive to take it out on. The system had a word for what Lyle did. The system also had a way of losing paperwork and missing court dates and placing children back in the same homes that broke them. Wren had stopped expecting the system to work by the time she was 14. She had stopped expecting anything from anyone by 15. And at 17, standing on the shoulder of I-90 with frozen feet and an empty stomach and nothing ahead of her but more highway, she had stopped expecting even herself to make it through the night. The thought came the way bad thoughts always came. Quiet. Almost reasonable. Like a voice in a waiting room calling her number. What if you just sat down? What if you stopped walking and sat in the snow and let the cold finish what everything else had started? Nobody would notice. Nobody would come looking. She squeezed her eyes shut and kept walking. Over to her right, beyond the frozen fields and the dark line of cottonwoods that followed the Yellowstone River, a faint glow stained the low clouds. The Winter Thunder Rally had been going all weekend at the Billings Motorsports Park. She had seen the flyers taped to the gas station window in Laurel. Monster trucks, stunt bikes, fireworks. The kind of event that families drove hours to see that kids talked about for weeks after. The last fireworks had gone off around midnight, smearing the sky orange and purple for a few seconds before the snow swallowed the color. Wren walked in the opposite direction. The road curved gently and the shoulder narrowed where a steel guardrail took over. Snow had packed against the metal in ridges gray and crusted where the plows had shoved it aside. She shifted her backpack higher on her shoulders and shoved her hands deeper into her pockets, fingertips burning inside thin gloves that had a hole in the right index finger. That was when she saw the skid marks. They started near the center line and cut across both lanes at a sharp angle, two black streaks carved into the white, like someone had dragged a blade across the road. They ran all the way to the guardrail, where the metal bent outward in a shape that looked almost human, like something had hit it hard enough to make it scream. Wren slowed, her breath caught. Her eyes followed the marks to the rail, then over the rail into the darkness below. Instinct pulled at her like a hand on her collar. Car wrecks meant police. Police meant questions. Questions meant names, addresses, legal guardians, things she did not have or could not explain. Every lesson her life had taught her said the same thing. Keep moving. Do not stop for what is not yours. She dropped her gaze, tightened her jaw, took 10 more steps past the bent guardrail. 20. The snow crunched under her ruined sneakers and the wind pushed at her back like it was trying to help her leave. She had almost convinced herself that whatever had happened back there was not her problem when she heard it. Not the wind, not a truck, not the low fading echo from the rally. A sound that came from below the road carried up by the cold air and the silence of the empty fields. A sound that was human in a way she recognized in her bones because she had made it herself alone in rooms where no one came. A groan, raw and broken. The kind that does not perform for an audience. The kind that happens when the body is past pretending. Wren stopped. Her heart hammered against the inside of her chest. For 3 seconds, she stood perfectly still, eyes closed, fists balled in her pockets. If she ignored it, maybe it would stop. Maybe it was ice shifting, metal settling, the highway playing tricks on a tired mind in a tired body. Then she heard the word, help, faint, strangled, like it had to claw its way out of a throat full of something wet. Help, Lyle Purcell's voice rose up in her memory, ugly and automatic. You are nothing. You hear me? You are nothing and nobody, and if you disappeared off the face of the earth tomorrow, the only thing anyone would feel is relief. The cold, bitter ears, wind shoved at her back. She could pretend she never heard. Nobody knew she was out here. Nobody would blame a homeless girl for walking past a wreck on a frozen highway. Nobody ever blamed the ones who kept going. That was the whole point. The world was built for people who kept going. Her body turned before her fear could finish the argument. Wren crossed to the guardrail, grabbed the freezing metal with both hands, and leaned over. The embankment dropped away steep and fast, a white slope broken by rock and dark scrub brush. At the bottom, maybe 30 feet down, something big and black lay crumpled in the snow. A motorcycle, chrome dulled by frost. The back wheel still turning slowly, catching moonlight on each rotation. Exhaust hissing thin and weak from a pipe that was half buried in the drift. Next to the bike, twisted in a way that made her stomach tighten, a man lay on his back. One leg was pinned under the machine. One arm was flung out to the side palm, open and bloody, against the white ground. His leather vest was torn at the shoulder, but the patches on it were still visible even from up here. Curved letters across the top rocker that she could not quite read. A white skull with wings. And below that, larger than the rest, a single word stitched in bold thread that she could make out in the moonlight. President. The word sat in the air between her eyes and the man's broken body. She had seen those patches before. In documentaries. In news clips about rallies in Sturgis and Daytona. On the backs of men the television called outlaws and the law called worse. Men her stepfather cursed at when they came on screen. You see those people? You stay away from them. They will eat you alive. Help. The sound again. Weaker now, the man's head rolled slightly, beard crusted with ice lips going blue. From this angle, she could see the way his chest hitched with every breath, like each one cost him something he was running out of. She could walk away. No one would ever know she had been standing here. The snow would keep falling, trucks would keep passing. By morning, somebody with a badge and a warm car would find whatever was left. The photograph in her backpack pressed against her spine. Caleb, 8 years old, syrup on his chin, his arms slung around her waist like she was the only safe thing left in the world. The last thing he had whispered to her when Lyle threw her out. "Do not freeze out there, stupid." The shelter woman's voice came back to her. A paper cup of soup pressed into her hands on a Tuesday night in Spokane when the temperature was 9 degrees and she had not eaten in 2 days. Trash does not stop, honey. Trash does not care. If you are stopping, if you are caring, then you are not what they told you. Wren swung her right leg over the guardrail. For one second, her foot hung above the slope, and the drop yawned under her, and the wind grabbed at her jacket, and the sensible part of her brain screamed at her to get back on the road and keep walking west until she found a truck stop or a bridge or a warm vent to sleep beside. She jumped. The hill took her fast. She hit the snow on her side and slid, grabbing at dead branches that snapped in her hands. Cold shot up her sleeves and down her collar and filled her shoes. She crashed into a low stump, breath punched out of her lungs, and came to rest 4 feet from the wreck. Up close, the damage was worse than it had looked from above. The Harley's front end was crushed, headlights smashed, handlebars twisted at an angle that looked like a broken wrist. The man pinned under it breathed in short, ragged gasps. Each one sounded like it might be the last. His eyes opened when she crawled closer. Blue. A shocking, clear blue, bright in a face smeared with blood and road grit. For a moment, they stared at each other. A homeless girl in a denim jacket and borrowed boots, and a man whose vest said he owned every mile of road in Montana. She did the math without trying. His weight, the bike's weight, the angle of his leg, the cold. If he stayed pinned, the pressure and the temperature would do damage that surgeons could not undo. She had watched enough first aid videos on library computers to know that much. Wren planted her feet in the snow, wrapped both hands around the Harley's twisted handlebars, and pulled. The bike did not move. Pain shot through her forearms, white and sharp. She bit down on a sound, shifted her grip. Tried again. The metal felt welded to the frozen earth. Her back screamed, her vision blurred gray at the edges. She weighed almost nothing against that machine. The bike weighed close to 700 pounds. "Kid," the man rasped. She ignored him and pulled harder. Her shoes slipped. Her shoulders felt like they were coming apart at the joints. For one heartbeat, the bike lifted. An inch, maybe 2. The man sucked in a breath and yanked his leg free, boots scraping across ice as he dragged himself sideways. The Harley crashed back down with a sound that shook the ground. Wren fell to her knees, hands burning, chest heaving, sweat cooling on her neck even as the cold ate through her shirt from every direction. "You are out of your mind," the man whispered. Something like a laugh rode his breath, broken and thin. "You are heavy," Wren said. The words came out flat and shaking. She looked up at the highway above them. The strip of asphalt was black against the sky, empty in both directions. No headlights, no sirens, nothing. "You have a phone?" she asked. The man jerked his chin toward his chest. Inside pocket. She reached into the torn leather vest with trembling fingers and found a smartphone slick with blood. The screen lit up under her thumb. Locked. Face recognition. She tilted the phone toward the man's face, angling it past the blood and the frost, and the screen unlocked. A list of recent calls with names that meant nothing to her. Tank, Rabbit, Clubhouse. One contact at the top starred and bolded Officer's Emergency. She hit the number. The line rang once, a voice answered. Low, hard. The kind of voice that had never been surprised by anything. "Yeah, there has been a wreck," Wren said. Her voice was steady now, pulled tight like a wire. "I-90 eastbound, just past the Billings Motorsports Park exit. Your guy went off the road. He is alive, but it is bad." A pause, long enough for the wind to change direction. "Who is this?" "Nobody," Wren said. "But if you do not get here soon, your president is going to freeze to death in this ditch." The silence on the other end lasted 3 beats. When the voice came back, it was colder. Stay with him. Do not let him close his eyes. We are coming. The line went dead. Ren lowered the phone and looked at the man in the snow. His chest rose and fell in a rhythm that was too slow. Frost had begun to form on his beard again. The word president on his vest caught the moonlight every time he breathed. She had just called them, told them exactly where she was, alone at the bottom of a frozen ditch with their leader bleeding beside her. Every warning she had ever heard about men like this stacked up in her head like bricks. She put the phone in her pocket and did not move. The cold pressed in harder. Her denim jacket was soaked through from the slide down the embankment. Her fingers had stopped hurting, which she knew was worse than hurting. She looked at the man, at the blood on his face, at the way his body shook in small, involuntary spasms. Then she did something that made no sense at all. She unzipped her jacket, pulled it off, and laid it across his chest. The cold hit her like a wall. Her t-shirt was thin and wet, and it froze against her skin within seconds. Her teeth chattered so hard she could feel it in her jaw hinges. But the man's shaking slowed just a little, and his eyes found her again. "Kid," he said, "you will die." "So will you," Ren said. "At least one of us should have a jacket." His cracked lips moved. Not a smile, something older than a smile and sadder. "Dawson," he whispered. Ren went still. Her last name. She had not said it, had not said any name at all. The phone call had been anonymous. She was nobody out here, a shape in the snow, with no identification, no history, no file. The man's blue eyes locked on her face with a focus that should not have been possible for someone this broken. "Dawson," he said again, quieter, like a prayer or a curse, she could not tell which. Then his eyes rolled shut and his hand went limp against the ground. Ren stared at him. The monitor in the back of her mind, the one that tracked danger the way a smoke detector tracked heat, was screaming. He knew her name. This stranger, this man she had never seen before tonight, pinned under a motorcycle on a frozen Montana highway, had looked at her face and said the name she had carried like a stone since the day her father walked out and never came back. She pressed 2 fingers to his neck. Pulse still there, weak but there. She lifted his head slightly and packed snow under it to keep his airway clear, the way she had seen in a video about wilderness trauma she had watched on a library computer in Spokane last winter when she had nowhere else to go. "Stay awake," she told him, shaking his shoulder. "Hey, keep your eyes open." His eyelids flickered but did not open. She slapped him lightly on the cheek. Not hard, just enough. His eyes cracked open again, glassy and wandering. "Talk to me," she said. "Tell me your name." "Grave," he said. The word came out like gravel in a tin cup. "Your real name." A pause. "Daniel." "Okay, Daniel, you are going to stay awake and you are going to keep talking to me. You understand?" His mouth twitched. "Bossy," he murmured. "Alive," Ren corrected. She crouched beside him, arms wrapped around her own body, shaking violently. The cold was inside her now, past the skin, past the muscles, settling into the core of her like a tenant who planned to stay. She could feel her thinking slow, her reactions lag. The edges of her vision had gone soft and dark. Hypothermia. She knew the word. She knew what came after it. But she did not leave. She talked to keep him conscious and to keep herself from drifting. She told him about the truck stop in Laurel and the night manager who kicked her out. She told him about the long-haul driver who gave her $20. She told him about the sandwich behind the dumpster. Small things, ugly things. The kind of details that do not make it into stories because they are too ordinary to mean anything to anyone except the person living them. Grave listened, or seemed to. His eyes stayed on her face. Once his hand moved and found her wrist and held it. Not tight, just enough to say, "I am still here." Ren was describing the way snow sounds when it lands on water, when she heard something new. Not the wind, not a truck. A low, layered rumble that came from the west, rolling across the flat, dark land like distant thunder, except it did not fade. It grew and kept growing until the air itself vibrated with it. She looked up at the strip of highway. Headlights crested the rise. Not one, not 3. A long, steady line of them cutting through the falling snow in a formation too tight and too deliberate to be traffic. The sound deepened as they got closer, engine after engine. each one adding a new layer to a roar that she felt in the ground under her knees. They were not sending a car. They were bringing everyone they had. The bikes lined up along the shoulder front wheels at the guardrail, maybe 30 of them. Headlights spilling down the embankment, washing the wreck in white. Silhouettes moved behind the beams, big shapes in leather and denim, patches catching the glare. For a moment, Ren felt like she was standing in the center of a stage she had not auditioned for and the audience had just arrived. One figure swung off the lead bike and stepped to the rail, gray beard down to his chest, shoulders that filled his cut like they had been built for it. His eyes found Ren first, their gazes locked. She saw herself the way he must have seen her. A skinny girl in a wet t-shirt, no jacket, kneeling in the snow beside his president, with blood on her hands and ice in her hair. Every breath a white cloud, every bone visible through her skin. Then his eyes dropped to Grave and his face changed, hard lines snapping into something raw. "That is him," a voice called from above. "That is Grave." Everything moved at once. Men came over the guardrail, sliding down toward the wreck. Some dropped into positions that looked practiced. One was already on a phone shouting for an ambulance. Another cracked open a medical kit. Ren stumbled backward as two men reached Grave. One with a patch that read, "Stitch," dropped to his knees and checked, breathing, check pulse. The other braced Grave's neck with both hands. "What happened?" Stitch barked. "He was already down here when I heard him," Ren said. Her voice sounded far away to her own ears. "The bike was on his leg. I pulled it up so he could get free." "You moved the bike." Stitch's eyes cut to her, not angry, measuring. The bearded man slid down the embankment with more control than someone his size should have had. His cut read Iron Wolves, Montana, and a name patch over his heart said Flint. Flint leaned over Grave. His eyes scanned the damage. "Brother," he said, voice steady as a level. "Stay with me." Grave's eyelids flickered. His gaze found Flint, then slid past him to Ren. "Kid," he breathed. "She came." His head rolled to the side. Ren stood apart from the men, arms wrapped around herself, shaking so hard her teeth clicked. She watched them work on Grave with the kind of quiet efficiency that comes from practice. Not the first time they had pulled a brother out of the dark. She could see it in the way they moved. No wasted motion, no panic. Then she remembered. She pulled Grave's phone from her pocket, opened the camera, and crouched beside the overturned Harley. The brake line hung from the front assembly, severed clean. Not frayed, not worn. The cut was straight and deliberate, made by a blade, not by road debris or metal fatigue. She photographed it. 3 angles, close enough to see the grain of the rubber. She checked each image on the screen to make sure it was clear. When she stood up, Flint was watching her. "What are you doing?" he asked. "That brake line was cut," Ren said. She turned the phone screen toward him. "Clean slice. Somebody wanted him on that guardrail." Flint looked at the photographs. His jaw tightened until the muscles stood out like cable. He did not ask how she knew what a cut brake line looked like. He did not ask why a 17-year-old girl on a highway at 1 in the morning that was thinking about evidence. He just looked at the photos, then looked at her, and something shifted behind his eyes. "What is your name?" he asked. "Ren." "Last name?" She hesitated. Grave had already said it, had whispered it in the snow like he was reading it off a headstone. The words sat in her throat. "Dawson," she said. Flint went still, the same way Grave had gone still, a silence that was not empty but full, loaded with something she could not see. Before he could speak, red and blue lights painted the snow above them. A state patrol car pulled onto the shoulder behind the wall of bikes. A trooper climbed out, hat in hand, scanning the scene. "Evening," the trooper said. "Got a call about a motorcycle down." "Ambulance is 2 minutes out," Flint answered. "Your dispatch should have it." The trooper's gaze dropped to the ditch, to the bikes, to Ren standing apart from the men in a wet t-shirt with her arms crossed over her chest. His expression shifted. Concern for the girl, caution for the company she was keeping. "And you are," he said. Ren felt caught between 2 walls. Law on one side, club on the other. Both dangerous, just in different ways. She opened her mouth, but Flint spoke first. "She is the one who found him," Flint said. "Climbed down, pulled the bike off his leg, called us. She is the reason he is still breathing." The trooper studied her. His badge read Hagen. He had the face of a man who had spent 30 years on highways and had learned to read people the way mechanics read engines. "That right," he said. Wren nodded. "You got somewhere warm to go tonight." She thought about the underpass, the shelter line, the locked front door of a house in Spokane where Lyle Purcell was probably asleep in his recliner with an empty bottle on the floor beside him. "No," she said. Trooper Hagen looked at her for a long time. Then he sighed the way men sigh when they see a problem they cannot fix with paperwork. "All right, I need a statement from you. After that, we will figure something out." "She can give her statement at the hospital," Flint said. "Our brother is in surgery as soon as that ambulance gets here. She should be there." Hagen considered this, then he nodded. "Fine, but I ride behind you. If she is not there when I walk in, we have a different conversation." "Understood," Flint said. The ambulance arrived 30 seconds later. EMTs slid down the embankment with a stretcher and a backboard. They worked fast, collar on, legs splinted, Grave strapped down and carried up the hill by four men who handled him like he was made of glass and gunpowder. Wren pressed herself against the bank and watched. One EMT stopped on his way up and looked at her. Young guy with kind eyes. "You all right, Mr. "I am fine," Wren said. The lie came easy. She had been practicing it her whole life. Grave was loaded into the ambulance and gone in a blast of siren and spinning lights. The sound faded east toward Billings, taking the urgency with it and leaving behind something quieter, heavier. Wren stood on the shoulder of Highway 90, surrounded by 30 bikers who were all looking at her. Engines idling, snow falling. The patrol car parked behind them like a period at the end of a sentence. Flint held out a helmet, black, scratched. It had a small Iron Wolves sticker on the back. "You are riding with us," he said. Wren looked at the helmet, at the line of bikes, at the men in their cuts, their faces hard and unreadable in the mix of headlights and falling snow. Every warning she had ever heard about this world stacked up inside her head. But the cold was in her bones now, and the alternative was walking back into a night that had already tried to kill her once. She took the helmet. It was heavy. She pulled it on, and the padding pressed cold against her ears. Flint reached over and snapped the chin strap in place with one quick motion. "Hold on to me, or the grab bar," he said. "Do not let go." She swung her leg over the back of the Harley. The engine rumbled through the frame and into her legs, a vibration that felt alive. She put her hands on the grab bar behind the seat because touching a stranger felt like one step too far, even a stranger who was about to drive her through a snowstorm. Flint raised two fingers, a small signal. 30 engines came alive in sequence. A wave of sound that rolled down the formation and echoed off the snowbanks and came back changed deeper, like the highway itself was answering. Then they moved. The first jolt nearly threw Wren backward, but she locked her grip and held on. The bike surged onto I-90 and the wind hit her like a hand. Cold air found every gap in her wet t-shirt, every inch of exposed skin. But for the first time that night, the cold was not the thing she feared most. The speed was. The dark was. The not knowing what waited at the other end of this ride. Highway lamps flicked past in steady intervals. The line of bikes flowed ahead of them, red taillights curving through the snow like a river of embers. Each time a truck appeared, the formation shifted to let it through, then stitched itself back together. Tight, practiced. A single creature with 30 heads and 60 wheels. The patrol car followed behind, its lights off now, just headlights in the dark. Wren watched the night slide past Flint's shoulder. Snowfields, dark trees, the occasional farmhouse light, small and yellow and impossibly far away. Somewhere ahead, the ambulance was cutting the same path toward Billings, carrying a man who had looked at her face and said a name she had not given him. She pressed her forehead against the back of Flint's cut and closed her eyes. The leather smelled like engine oil and cold air and cigarette smoke. Her body shook and her hands ached, and her mind kept circling back to the same question. How did he know her name? How did a stranger in a ditch on a frozen Montana highway look at a homeless girl he had never met and say the word Dawson like it was something he had been carrying for years? The skyline of Billings appeared on the horizon, a low cluster of lights on the dark plain. The pack peeled off toward the hospital exit, the patrol car following close. At the first red light, drivers and passing cars stared through their windows at the column of Iron Wolves rolling through the city streets at 2 in the morning with a state trooper riding escort. Wren caught a glimpse of herself in a storefront window as they passed, a thin shape clinging to the back of a motorcycle she had no business being on. No jacket, no plan, hair frozen flat against her scalp, hands white on the grab bar. She looked like exactly what she was, a girl who had walked into someone else's story and could not find the door back out. They rolled into the hospital parking lot, and the engines cut one by one until the quiet made her ears ring. Steam rose from exhaust pipes. Breath smoked in the cold. Riders dismounted helmets, coming off to reveal faces that all shared the same tight expression. Nobody spoke above a murmur. Nobody stood by their bikes. They moved toward the emergency room entrance together. Flint stepped off and turned to her. He looked at her bare arms, at the goosebumps and the blue tinge at her fingertips, and without a word he pulled off his own leather jacket, the one beneath his cut, and draped it over her shoulders. It was warm from his body, and it weighed more than her backpack. It smelled like decades of road. "Helmet off," he said. "Stay close." Wren pulled the helmet free. Her hair fell around her face, wet and tangled. She followed Flint through the automatic doors into fluorescent light and the sharp smell of antiseptic and old coffee. The waiting room was small. The pack filled it like water fills a jar, pressing into corners and lining the walls. Nurses at the front desk went pale when they looked up. "Sir," one of them started, "you cannot all be in here." Flint raised both hands slightly, palms out. "We know," he said. "We just want to know where they took our president. We will wait wherever you need us." The nurse's eyes moved from the cuts to Trooper Hagen, walking in behind them. "He is with them," Hagen said, nodding at Flint. "They are here for the victim." The nurse swallowed. "Trauma 3, she said. "Surgery prep, only a few at a time." "We will rotate," Flint said. He turned to the room and pointed at 3 men. You stay. The rest side hallway. Stay out of everyone's way. Nobody in this building gets trouble from us." A murmured acknowledgement moved through the group. For a moment, Wren saw the club as something she had not expected. There was order here, structure. They listened to him not because they feared him, but because they trusted him. The difference was in their eyes. Flint looked at Wren. "You too," he said. Trooper Hagen stepped forward. "Statement," he reminded gently. Flint's jaw flexed. "Give her 5 minutes, then she is all yours." Hagen nodded. They stepped into a smaller room off the waiting area. Plastic chairs, a drink machine humming in the corner. A television mounted on the wall playing a muted talk show where a man in a suit was laughing at something nobody in this room would ever find funny. Wren took a chair near the wall. Her body was shutting down in stages. The adrenaline was gone. The cold had eaten into her. Her hands would not stop trembling, and her vision kept going soft at the edges. Stitch appeared with a blanket and a paper cup of coffee. He put the blanket around her shoulders and the coffee in her hands without asking if she wanted either. "Drink," he said, slow. She drank. The warmth slid down her throat and into her chest, and for a moment the shaking eased. Flint sat across from her. He watched her the way a man watches something he is trying to decide about. Not with suspicion, with recognition, like he was seeing a face he had seen before in a different time on a different person. "You did good out there," Stitch said, breaking the silence. "That leg was done if you had not gotten that bike off him." "I think I did it wrong," Wren said quietly. Stitch shrugged one shoulder. "In a perfect world, we do not touch anything until a spine board shows up. In this world, he bleeds out alone in a ditch if you do not. I will take broken over dead." The words landed somewhere deep in her and stayed. The door opened. Trooper Hagen stepped in, notepad in hand, pen ready. "All right, Wren," he said, "just tell me what you saw." She told him, from the skid marks to the guardrail, the sound of help, the jump, the bike, the call. She told it flat and precise, leaving out nothing and adding nothing. Her voice sounded like it belonged to someone else, someone who had not been freezing to death an hour ago. When she was done, Hagen closed his notepad. "You did the right thing calling it in," he said. "A lot of people would have kept walking." Wren did not know what to do with that. "You got any warrants?" Hagen asked. Practical, not threatening. "Any reason I should be running your name through the system?" "No," Wren said. "All right, you are free to go wherever these folks take you. If we need anything else, we will be in touch." He left. The door clicked shut. The heater hummed. Somewhere deep in the building, machines beeped around a man who might or might not wake up. Flint leaned forward in his chair, elbows on his knees. His eyes were steady on her face. Ren Dawson, he said, not a question, a confirmation. Yes, your father's name. What was it? The question hit her like a gust of cold air in a warm room. She thought about lying, but something in Flint's expression made lying feel like a waste of time. Harlan, she said. Harlan Dawson. Flint sat back like someone had pushed him in the chest. A low sound came out of him, half curse, half prayer. I knew it, he said quietly. Ren's hands tightened on the paper cup. Stitch looked between them. You sure? He asked Flint. Could be a coincidence. Look at her, Flint said. Same eyes, same jaw. Grave does not forget a face, and he does not forget a debt. The word debt hung in the air like smoke. Ren set the coffee down because her hands were shaking again, and it was not from the cold. What debt? She said. Flint studied her for a long moment. Then he spoke. Your father saved Graves' life once, 15 years ago, outside of a bar in Tacoma, took a bullet that was meant for Graves' head, went to the ground bleeding, could have stayed with us, could have patched in. Instead, he asked us to make him disappear. The room went quiet enough to hear the fluorescent lights buzz. Disappear him, Ren repeated. The phrase felt wrong in her mouth. The man who pulled the trigger had friends in places with badges, Flint said. And your father had a wife and a baby girl who was not even old enough to walk yet. They would have paid for his loyalty with their lives. So he walked away, left us owing him more than we could ever repay. Ren sat very still. The coffee cooled in the paper cup beside her. The blanket hung off one shoulder. All those years, all those nights lying awake in whatever bed the system had placed her in, staring at a ceiling building and rebuilding the same story. Her father left because she was not enough. Her father left because staying was harder than going. Her father left because that is what fathers do. And now this man in a leather cut in a hospital waiting room was telling her that Harlan Dawson had stepped in front of a bullet for a stranger and then vanished into nothing so that his daughter could keep breathing. The crack that opened in her chest was not grief. It was not relief. It was the sound of a story she had told herself for 17 years, breaking apart and falling to the floor in pieces she did not know how to pick up. She looked at Flint, at Stitch, at the closed door and the muffled sounds of a hospital at 2 in the morning. He knew, she said. Grave knew who I was, down in that ditch. He said my name. Flint nodded once. He recognized you, Flint said. Same face, same blood. I guarantee he knew the second he saw you. Ren stared at the wall, at a framed print of a Montana sunset that someone had hung there to make a room full of plastic chairs feel less like what it was. Somewhere on the other side of that wall, a man named Grave was lying on a table while surgeons tried to put him back together. A man her father had bled for. A man she had just pulled out of the snow without knowing any of it. She touched the edge of the leather jacket Flint had draped over her shoulders. It was too big for her. Everything in this world was too big for her. But she was here. And for the first time in a long time that felt like it might be enough. Grave woke up on the third day. Ren was sitting in the plastic chair beside his bed when it happened. Not because anyone had asked her to be there. Not because she had nowhere else to go, although that was also true. She was there because she had been there every morning since they brought him in, and the nurses had stopped asking her to leave sometime around hour 36 when they realized she would just come back. The room smelled like iodine and machine heat. Monitors ticked and beeped in rhythms she had memorized without meaning to. His leg was wrapped thick, suspended in a brace that held it at an angle designed by someone who understood geometry better than comfort. Tubes ran into both arms. A clip on his finger fed a glowing red number to a screen she checked every few minutes the way a sailor checks a compass. She was reading a magazine she had found in the waiting room, something about bass fishing in Arkansas, when his hand moved. Not a twitch, not the involuntary muscle spasm the nurses had warned her about. A deliberate motion, fingers closing slowly against the sheet, searching for something to grip. Ren set the magazine down. Graves' eyelids pulled apart like they weighed more than they should. His pupils contracted against the fluorescent light. For a moment he stared at the ceiling tiles with the blank expression of a man trying to remember which world he had woken up in. Then his gaze rolled sideways and found her. Kid, he said. His voice sounded like someone had run sandpaper down his throat. You are still here. You are hard to walk away from, Ren said. A sound came out of him that might have been a laugh if his ribs had allowed it. He winced and the monitor spiked for a second before settling back. How long? He asked. 3 days. His eyes moved around the room. The IV bags, the wires, the brace on his leg. He absorbed it the way she imagined he absorbed everything in one slow pass, filing the details somewhere behind those blue eyes, where they could be retrieved later. Flint, he asked, down the hall. He has been running things from a room the nurses gave up trying to keep him out of. The club. All here. Rotating shifts. Stitch sleeps in the chair across from me most nights. He snores. The corner of Graves' mouth moved. Not quite a smile. Something quieter. His gaze came back to her and stayed. The same look he had given her in the ditch. Recognition layered over something deeper. Something that reached past her face and into a place she could not see. Dawson, he said. Yeah. Flint told you. It was not a question. She answered it anyway. He told me about Tacoma, about the bullet, about my father. Grave closed his eyes. When he opened them again, something wet caught the light along his lower lashes. He did not wipe it away. Men like him, she understood, did not pretend that certain things did not hurt. Harlan, he said. The name sat in the air between them like a held breath. He was the best man I ever knew, and I have known a lot of men. Something pressed against the inside of Ren's chest. She dug her thumbnail into the pad of her index finger, a habit she had developed years ago to keep her face still when her insides were not. He left, she said. That is all I ever knew about him, that he left. He did not leave, Graves said. His voice was low, but the edges of it were hard enough to cut glass. He was removed. By me. Because the man who pulled that trigger had a badge and a brother in the prosecutor's office and connections that ran through every courthouse in Pierce County. If Harlan stayed visible, they would have found him, and they would not have stopped with him. The room hummed. A nurse walked past the door, shoes squeaking on tile. He had a wife, Grave continued, and a baby girl who was not even old enough to walk yet. He looked me in the eye on the floor of that parking lot with a hole in his shoulder, and he said, make me gone. Make it clean. Make sure they never have a reason to come looking for my family. Ren sat very still. Her hands were flat on her knees. Her face was a mask she had spent years building, and it now held perfectly, even as something behind it shifted like tectonic plates. So we did, Graves said. New documents, new city. The club paid for everything. And Harlan Dawson became a ghost so that his daughter could grow up without a target on her back. It did not work, Ren said quietly. Growing up, the way you are describing it, that is not what happened. Grave looked at her, at the borrowed boots, at the patched knee of her jeans, at the way her collarbone stood out above the neckline of her t-shirt like a map of meals missed. I know, he said, and that is a failure I will carry until they put me in the ground. Silence held the room for a long time after that. Not uncomfortable, just heavy. The kind of silence that happens when two people arrive at the same truth from opposite directions and stand on either side of it, looking at each other across the gap. Flint appeared in the doorway. He looked at Grave, and something released in his shoulders that had been locked there for 3 days. Brother, he said. Get in here, Grave said, and close the door. Flint stepped in and shut the door behind him. He stood at the foot of the bed, arms folded across his cut, and his eyes moved between Grave and Ren like he was reading a sentence that contained both of them. The brake line, Grave said. Cut clean, Flint said. The girl got photos before anyone touched the wreck. Smart. 3 angles. Clear as evidence gets. Graves' gaze shifted to Ren. You photographed it. I watched a documentary once, Ren said, about accident reconstruction. They said the first thing investigators lose is the scene, so I shot it before anyone moved anything. Well, something moved behind Graves' expression. Not surprise exactly. More like a man finding a tool in a drawer he did not remember stocking. Show me, he said. Ren pulled his phone from her jacket pocket. Flint had told her to keep it on the second day. Said Grave would want her to have it until he woke up. Said the photos on it were safer in her pocket than in anyone else's. She opened the camera roll and held the screen where Grave could see it. 3 images. The severed brake line hanging from the front assembly like a dead vine. The cut was clean and straight, the edges smooth and unfrayed. Not a tear, not a fatigue break. A cut made by a sharp blade applied with deliberate pressure. Graves studied each photo for a long time. His face did not change, but his fingers tightened on the bed rail until his knuckles went white. That is a precision tool, he said. Aviation snips or a flush cutter, not a pocket knife, not road damage. I know, Flint said. And here's the thing. He paused and the pause carried weight. Those tools, we keep them in the shop. Bay 3-second drawer from the left. I checked the inventory the morning after. A pair of Knipex flush cutters is missing. The implication landed in the room like a dropped stone. Inside job, Graves said. Not a question. Someone in the club cut your line, Flint said. Someone who had access to the shop, who knew your bike, who knew you would be riding home alone from the rally. Graves' jaw worked. The monitor beeped a little faster. Names, he said. I have been thinking about that for 3 days, Flint said. 12 men had shop access that week. I have been watching them, how they talk, where they look, who asked too many questions about the kid. About me, Wren said. Flint nodded. Most of the boys are glad you were there. Grateful. But one of them keeps circling, asking where you are staying, what you told the trooper, whether you saw anything besides the wreck. Who, Bashi? Graves said. Priest. The name sat in the room. Graves' expression did not change, but something behind his eyes went cold in a way that made the temperature of the room feel different. Priest, he repeated. Patched in 2 years ago, Flint said. Transferred from the Oregon chapter. Good worker. Never missed a run, never caused trouble. The kind of member you do not think about because he never gives you a reason to. The kind you do not notice, Graves said, until you need to. Wren listened. She filed the name the way she filed everything in a place where it could be retrieved when it mattered. Priest, shop access, organ transfer. Too many questions about the girl who found the president in the snow. Grave was quiet for a long moment. Then he looked at Wren. Here is what I am going to do, he said. His voice was stronger now, like deciding gave him fuel. Flint. Yeah, brother. Kid does not spend another night on concrete. You hear me? She gets a room, food, clothes that fit. Work at the shop if she wants it. Anybody who has a problem with that can bring it to me when I am standing. Flint nodded like he had already done it. Motel room is paid up through the week. Set it up the night we brought her in, before we knew her last name. That was for pulling him out of the snow, Wren said. That was for being the kind of person who does not walk past, Flint said. The name is extra. Wren looked at her hands, at the bruises on her palms from the handlebars, at the torn cuticle on her right thumb that had not stopped bleeding for 2 days. What if I do not want to be part of this, she said. The question came out before she could cage it. Graves' gaze did not waver. Then you take the room, the food, and the warm clothes, and tomorrow you walk whichever direction you want. Door is open both ways. We are not a cage. He paused. His eyes found hers and held them. But if you stay, he said quietly, then we do this right. You are not just some stray kid we threw a blanket at and forgot. We teach you how to work, how to stand up when somebody tries to throw you in a ditch. The word stay landed on something inside Wren that she had spent years paving over. A want so old she had almost forgotten its shape. A place that noticed if she went missing. A door that opened when she knocked instead of locking from the inside. Okay, she said. I will stay. For now. Grave closed his eyes. Something like peace moved across his face, brief and real. Good, he murmured. Hate owing ghosts. The motel room was small and clean, and it had a lock that worked. Wren stood inside the door for a full minute after Flint left, just looking at it. A bed with sheets that smelled like laundry detergent. A bathroom with hot water. A window that looked out on the parking lot of the Iron Wolf shop across the street. She showered for 20 minutes. The hot water hit her skin, and she stood under it without moving. Eyes closed, letting the heat reach places the cold had occupied for so long, she had forgotten they existed. She washed her hair with motel shampoo that smelled like fake flowers, and she did not care. Clean clothes were folded on the bed when she came out. Jeans that fit, a flannel shirt, a pair of work boots used but solid with a note tucked inside the left one in handwriting she did not recognize. These were my daughters. She does not need them anymore. They are good boots. Treat them right. Wren laced them up. They fit like they had been waiting for her. She slept for 14 hours. When she woke, sunlight was coming through the window and the smell of coffee was drifting from somewhere nearby. For a few seconds, she did not know where she was. The disorientation was not unpleasant. It felt like waking up in a country she had never visited, where the rules were different and the air was clean. She started at the shop the next morning. Oil changes and tire rotations and basic engine work, the kind of tasks that required attention and repetition, and left her hands black by noon. Stitch showed her how to read a torque wrench. A quiet man named Dozer taught her the difference between a shovel head and an evolution engine by pointing at parts and waiting for her to name them until she got it right. She did not talk much. Nobody asked her to. The men in the shop communicated in nods and gestures and the occasional short sentence that carried more information than most people packed into a paragraph. She adapted to it faster than she expected. Silence had always been her first language. On the fourth day at the shop, she called Caleb. She had bought a prepaid phone with part of the $20 bill the truck driver had given her, loading it with the minimum minutes at a gas station 2 blocks from the motel. She sat on the bed with the phone in her lap for 10 minutes before she dialed, rehearsing what she would say, trying to find words that sounded normal for a conversation between a 17-year-old sister and an 8-year-old brother who had not heard her voice in 3 weeks. Caleb answered on the second ring. Wren. His voice was small and immediate, like he had been holding the phone waiting for it to ring. Hey, Bug. Where are you? Are you okay? Lyle said you ran away and you are not coming back. Aunt Deb said the same thing. She said I should not wait for you. Wren closed her eyes. Aunt Deb was Lyle's sister. She had taken Caleb after Wren got thrown out. She drank less than Lyle but cared about the same amount, which was not much. I did not run away, Wren said. Lyle kicked me out. There is a difference. Same thing, and Caleb said. You are gone. The honesty of children. It cut in ways that adult cruelty never could. I am in Montana, Wren said. I have a room. I have a job. I am figuring things out. Are you coming back for me? The question was so direct and so stripped of pretense that it hit her sternum like a fist. Yes, she said. I am coming back for you. When? Soon, I promise. Are you eating? Is Deb feeding you? A pause. The kind of pause that answered the question before the words did. She goes out a lot, Caleb said. There is cereal, and sometimes she brings stuff from the gas station. Wren's free hand closed into a fist against the bedspread. Caleb, listen to me. I am going to figure this out. Okay, I just need a little time. Okay, he said. The trust in that single word was unbearable. She hung up and sat on the bed in the quiet room and pressed her palms against her eyes, and did not cry because she had decided a long time ago that crying was a luxury she could not afford. Then she went back to the shop and changed oil until her hands stopped shaking. The video appeared online on the 6th day. Flint showed it to her on his phone in the shop office, a small room with a metal desk and a calendar from 2019 still pinned to the wall. The footage was grainy and shot through a tinted car window. It showed the ditch from above, the overturned Harley, a thin figure kneeling in the snow, the shape of a man lying flat, then headlights arriving one after another, filling the screen with white. The video cut off after 43 seconds. The title read, Iron Wolves President Left to Die on Highway. Someone underneath posted a comment, Who is the girl? 14,000 views in 6 hours, Flint said, and climbing. Wren stared at the screen, at the shape that was her small and dark against the snow, at the way the headlights washed everything out until you could not tell where the ground ended and the sky began. Where did it come from? She asked. That is the question, Flint said. The angle, the tint on the window. It matches what you described. Black SUV, no front plates. Somebody was there before you arrived, Wren said. They stopped and they filmed it. They watched him lying there and they did not call anyone. Because they already knew he was there, Flint said. Because they put him there. The words settled between them. Whoever cut that brake line, Wren said slowly, wanted to make sure it worked. They followed him. They waited. And when he went off the road, they drove up and recorded it. Trophy footage, Flint said. Proof for whoever paid for it. So why release it? Flint leaned back in his chair. 2 reasons. First, it puts pressure on us. The whole world sees our president in a ditch and a kid saving him. Makes us look vulnerable. Second, it identifies you. Anyone watching that video who knows what they are looking for can figure out a girl was there, alone, before we arrived. Ren felt something cold move through her that had nothing to do with the Montana winter. They want people to know I was there, she said. They want us to know you were there, Flint corrected. They want us wondering why, wondering if it was a coincidence, wondering if the girl is part of it. Am I under suspicion? Flint looked at her for a long time. Some of the boys are asking questions. You showed up at the exact right time, at the exact right place. In their world, that does not happen by accident. In my world, it does, Ren said. In my world, it is called being homeless on a highway. I know that. Grave knows that. But not everyone in the club has met you. Not everyone trusts what they have not tested. Ren absorbed this. She had spent her whole life being doubted by people who did not bother to look past the surface. Being doubted by bikers was not fundamentally different. It just carried more weight. What do you want me to do? She asked. What you have been doing, Flint said. Work. Show up. Keep your eyes open. She kept her eyes open. Over the next 3 days, she watched the shop the way she used to watch group homes and foster kitchens. Not staring. Never staring. But noticing the rhythms of who arrived when, who talked to whom, who left the main floor and for how long. Priest was easy to spot once she knew what to look for. Medium height, lean build, dark hair pulled back in a knot. His cut was clean and his boots were polished, and he had the kind of face that settled into whatever expression the room required. Friendly when friendliness was expected. Serious when seriousness was needed. A mirror, Ren thought. He reflects whatever you want to see. He worked Bay 3, second drawer from the left, the drawer where the missing flush cutters used to live. On the 8th day, Ren was in the office pulling an invoice for a brake caliper when she heard Priest's voice in the hallway outside. Low, fast, the tone of a man who did not want to be overheard. She froze. The invoice hung in her hand. Through the thin wall, she caught fragments. Handled. Told you it would be handled. The girl is still here. That was not part of... Tell him she does not matter. She is a stray. They will get tired of her. Then footsteps moving away. A door opening and closing. Ren set the invoice down. Her hands were steady. Her heart was not. She did not go to Flint, not yet. Instead, she went to the parts counter, pulled the shop logbook from under the register, and began turning pages. Every purchase, every tool order, every part requisition for the last 6 months was recorded in the book in different handwritings. She found what she was looking for on a page dated 11 days before the crash. A purchase order for Knipex flush cutters, quantity 1 pair. Ordered by Priest, received 5 days before the rally. She photographed the page with her prepaid phone. Then she turned to the next page and the next, looking for anything else that connected. She found a second entry 2 days before the crash. A brake line fitting same model as the one on Graves' Harley, ordered under a name she did not recognize, but billed to the shop's supply account. Authorized by Priest. She photographed that too. That night, she lay in the motel room with the phone on the pillow beside her and looked at the ceiling and assembled the pieces in her head like a jigsaw puzzle spread across a table. The cut brake line, the missing flush cutters, Priest ordering the tool, Priest ordering a matching brake line fitting, the phone call she had overheard, the video released from the SUV that had watched Grave die. Each piece alone meant nothing. Together, they made a shape she could see clearly even in the dark. She did not sleep. The next morning, she went to Flint. She showed him the photographs on her phone, the logbook entries. She told him about this conversation she had overheard through the office wall. She laid it out the way she had seen investigators do in documentaries, one fact after another. No embellishment, no interpretation, just the chain. Flint looked at each photo. He read each entry. He listened to every word she said without interrupting. When she was done, he sat in silence for a full minute. You did not come to me when you heard the call, he said. I wanted to have more than a feeling, Ren said. Feelings do not hold up, evidence does. Something shifted in Flint's expression. The same look Grave had given her in the hospital, a man finding a tool he did not know he had. Come with me, he said. They went to the hospital. Grave was awake, sitting up slightly, the leg brace adjusted to allow limited movement. Flint closed the door and Wren laid the evidence out again. The photos, the logbook entries, the overheard conversation. Grave listened the way he did everything. In one slow pass, filing. When she finished, the room was quiet. "Bring him in," Ed Grave said. Flint made one phone call. 20 minutes later, Priest walked into the hospital room with the easy stride of a man who did not know the floor was about to disappear. He saw Wren and his step hitched. A fraction of a second, a glitch so small that most people would have missed it. Wren did not miss it. Flint closed the door behind him. "Sit down," Graves said. Priest sat. His eyes moved between the three of them, calculating, and Wren watched the mirror of his face cycle through expressions. Concern, confusion, loyalty. Hurst. Grave did not speak for a long time. He let the silence do the work. Wren had seen this technique before in a different context. The school counselor who waited until the child filled the silence with the truth because the truth was always heavier than the quiet. Priest broke first. "Something wrong, Press?" he asked. Voice level, steady, almost perfect. Grave nodded at Wren. "Show him." Wren held up her phone. The logbook entries, the purchase order for the flush cutters, the brake line fitting, the photographs of the severed line on the Harley. She watched Priest's face as each image registered. The mirror cracked, not all at once, in stages, the way ice cracks on a pond when the temperature shifts. First the eyes, then the jaw, then the hands which moved to his knees and pressed down as if the chair was tilting. "That does not prove anything," Priest said. His voice was level, almost perfect. "Tools go missing. Logbooks get entries from a dozen hands. You are building a house out of coincidence." "Then explain the phone call," Wren said. "Handled. The girl does not matter. She is a stray." Your words. Priest looked at her. For the first time, the mirror was gone. What was underneath was not fear exactly. It was the cold recognition of a man who has been outmaneuvered by someone he had dismissed. "She is a homeless kid," Priest said. The word came out flat. "You are going to take her word over a patch member." "I am going to take evidence over a patch," Graves said. "Every time." The room held its breath. "I want a lawyer," Priest said. "You are not under arrest," Graves said. "You are sitting in a hospital room with your president. And I am asking you, brother, to tell me the truth before I hear it from someone who is not giving you the chance." The silence lasted a full minute. Wren counted the seconds on the monitor's beep. 60 of them, each one a small hammer striking the same nail. Priest's shoulders dropped 1 inch, then 2. The collapse was slow and total, like a building settling into its foundation after the supports had been pulled. "It was not supposed to go like this," he said quietly. "Tell me," Graves said, and Priest told them. Wade Schofield. The name dropped into the room like a stone into still water. Former deputy sheriff of Yellowstone County. Forced out 6 years ago for corruption. Skimming seized assets. Protecting drug shipments in exchange for a cut. When internal affairs closed in, he resigned before they could fire him and took his connections with him. Now he ran a real estate operation on the east side of Billings. Strip malls and storage units and rental properties that generated just enough legitimate income to explain the cash that flowed through them from sources nobody asked about. He had a judge in his pocket, a man named Mercer sitting on the county bench who made sure certain cases never reached trial and certain warrants never got signed. Priest had been Schofield's man from the beginning. Transferred from Oregon not because of a club reassignment, but because Schofield needed eyes inside the Iron Wolves. Grave had been collecting information on Schofield's operation for years, old habits from a time when the club and the county had overlapped in ways that left scars. Schofield wanted that information destroyed. More than that, he wanted Grave gone. He said it would look like an accident, Priest said the rally would give cover, everyone drinking, riding late icy roads. No one would question a single bike wreck on I-90. "And the SUV?" Flint asked. "Schofield's men. They were supposed to confirm the kill and film it as proof. When the girl showed up, they panicked, drove off, released the video later to put pressure on the club and muddy the water." Wren listened to all of it. She kept her face still. She kept her hands flat on her knees. Inside, the pieces she had been assembling for days locked into their final positions with a sound she could almost hear. Graves stared at Priest for a long time. The monitor beeped beside him, steady and indifferent. "One more question," Graves said. His voice was quiet now, the kind of quiet that precedes weather. "Harlan Dawson." Priest's eyes moved to the floor. "What about Harlan Dawson?" Graves repeated. "Schofield talked about him," Priest said. "Said there was a man who had witnessed things in Tacoma, things connected to Schofield's early operation. Said the man had been disappeared by the club, but was still a loose thread." "Was," Graves said. Priest swallowed. "3 years ago," he said. "Car accident outside Spokane. Single vehicle. Icy road. Driver was a man named Harlan Dawson." The room stopped. Wren heard the words. She processed them. She understood their meaning in the way you understand the meaning of a diagnosis, clearly and completely, and with no ability to change what they describe. Her father had not simply vanished. Her father had not simply walked away and built a new life and forgotten the daughter he had left behind. Her father had been murdered by the same man who had cut the brake line on Graves' motorcycle, by the same man who had sent Priest into the club like a poison capsule hidden inside a handshake. "He found him," Wren said. Her voice was flat, controlled. The voice of a girl who had learned a long time ago that falling apart was something you did alone in the dark where nobody could use it against you. "Schofield found my father and killed him and made it look like an accident." "Yes," Priest said. Graves' hand found the bed rail and gripped it. His knuckles went white. His jaw clenched until the tendons stood out in his neck. "And Wren," he said, "the girl on the highway. Schofield knew about her." Priest nodded slowly. He knew Harlan had a kid. He said once that if anyone from the Dawson line ever showed up near the club, they would need to be dealt with. He called it cleaning the ledger. Cleaning the ledger. Wren let the phrase move through her and out the other side. It did not stick. It could not. Because the thing about being told you are a target is that if you have already survived what she had survived, the news lands differently. Not like a threat, like a confirmation of something you always suspected. The world was not indifferent to her. It was hostile, and now it had a name: Wade Schofield. Graves looked at Wren. The anger in his face was enormous, held in check by the kind of control that only comes from decades of practice. But beneath the anger, she saw something else. Grief. For Harlan. For the years lost. For the girl sitting in front of him who had pulled him out of the snow without knowing that the same man who put him there had killed her father. "We cannot take this to county court," Graves said. "Mercer sits on that bench. Anything we file gets buried." "Federal," Wren said. Both men looked at her. "If Schofield is laundering money through real estate and he has a sitting judge on his payroll, that is federal jurisdiction. Racketeering, public corruption. The county cannot touch it because the county is compromised, but a federal prosecutor can." Flint stared at her. "Where did you learn that? Library computers in Spokane," Wren said. "I had a lot of free time." Graves' mouth twitched, the first thing that looked like a real smile since he had woken up. "Trooper Hagen," Wren said. "He gave me his card. State police, not county. He is outside Schofield's circle. If I go to him with what we have, he can connect us to the right people." Graves looked at Flint. Flint looked at Graves. A conversation happened between them that required no words conducted in the language of men who have trusted each other for decades. "Your call, kid," Graves said. Wren stood up. The leather jacket Flint had given her hung off her shoulders, still too big. The work boots fit perfectly. Her hands were stained with engine oil, and her pockets held a phone full of photographs that could bring down a corrupt empire or get her killed. "I will need copies of everything you have on Schofield," she said to Graves. "The files you have been collecting, the financial records. Whatever made him want you dead." Graves studied her. 17 years old. Thin enough that the flannel shirt hung off her shoulders like a flag on a still day. Standing in a hospital room making demands of a man whose club controlled every back road in Montana. "Flint," he said, "give her everything." Wren walked out of the room and down the hall and past the nurse's station and through the automatic doors into cold Montana sunlight. The sky was white and enormous, and the parking lot was full of motorcycles with chrome that caught the light. She pulled Trooper Hagen's card from her back pocket and looked at the number printed on it. Then she pulled out her prepaid phone, the one with the photographs and the evidence, and the name of the man who had killed her father, and she dialed. The phone rang twice. "Hagen," the voice said. "Trooper Hagen, this is Ren Dawson. You took my statement on I-90 the night of the motorcycle wreck." "I remember you. You all right?" "I am fine, but I have information about the crash that I think you need to see. It is bigger than one wreck on a highway. It involves a former deputy sheriff named Wade Schofield, a county judge named Mercer, and the murder of a man named Harlan Dawson 3 years ago." Silence on the line, the kind of silence that happens when a man who has spent 30 years on highways realizes that the road just turned in a direction he did not expect. "Where are you?" Hagen asked. "Billings General Hospital. I can meet you wherever you need." "Stay there," Hagen said. "I am bringing someone with me. Federal, do not talk to anyone else before I get there." The line went dead. Ren put the phone in her pocket. She stood in the parking lot with the sun on her face and the cold in her lungs, and 30 motorcycles glinting around her like a steel congregation. Somewhere in Spokane, Caleb was eating cereal alone in a kitchen where nobody watched out for him. Somewhere in Billings, Wade Schofield was sitting behind a desk in a strip mall office, running numbers through a laundering operation he believed was untouchable, protected by a judge he believed was loyal, confident that the brake line he had ordered cut had done its job. He did not know about the girl. He did not know about the photographs or the logbook entries or the overheard phone call. He did not know that the daughter of the man he had murdered 3 years ago was standing in a hospital parking lot with enough evidence to bring his entire operation into a federal courtroom. He would find out soon enough. Ren looked up at the white Montana sky and thought about her father. Not the ghost she had invented. Not the coward Lyle had described. The real man. The one who had stepped in front of a bullet and then walked into the dark so that his daughter could stand in the light. She was standing in it now, and she was not walking away. Trooper Hagen arrived at Billings General 40 minutes after the call. He was not alone. The woman who walked in beside him wore a navy suit and no jewelry and carried a leather briefcase that looked like it had seen the inside of more courtrooms than most lawyers see in a career. Her name was Catherine Bryce, Assistant United States Attorney, District of Montana. She had a handshake that lasted exactly 1 second and eyes that did not move when she listened. They sat in the hospital cafeteria because it was the only room big enough that was not full of bikers. Ren laid the phone on the table between them and opened the photographs. The severed brake line, 3 angles, the logbook entries, the purchase order for the flush cutters signed by Priest. The brake line fitting ordered 2 days before the crash billed to the shop account, authorized by the same hand. Bryce looked at each image without speaking. She turned the phone sideways to examine the cut on the brake line. She zoomed in on the logbook signatures. She did not touch the phone, just looked, and Ren understood that this was a woman who had learned never to handle evidence she might later need to authenticate. "Tell me about the phone call you overheard," Bryce said. Ren told her, word for word. She had replayed it in her head enough times that the phrases were fixed in her memory like text burned into a screen. Handled. The girl is still here. She does not matter. She is a stray. Bryce wrote nothing down. She did not record. She just listened, and when Ren was finished, she sat back and folded her hands on the table. "And the man who made this call, Priest, he has given a full account to the club president." "Yes." "Including the connection to Wade Schofield." "Yes." "Including the death of Harlan Dawson." Something pressed against the inside of Ren's chest. She held it. "Yes." Bryce looked at Hagen. Something passed between them that Ren could not read, but could feel the way you feel a shift in air pressure before a storm. "I have been looking at Schofield for 18 months, Bryce said. She spoke directly to Ren, not to Hagen, which told Ren something about the kind of prosecutor she was. Money laundering through commercial real estate, shell companies registered in Wyoming, cash deposits structured to avoid reporting thresholds. Every time we get close evidence, disappears. Witnesses change their minds, warrants get delayed." "Judge Mercer," Ren said. Bryce's expression did not change, but her eyes sharpened. "You know about Mercer." "Priest named him. Schofield has him on payroll. Anything filed in county court goes through Mercer's chambers and comes out dead. Which is why county has never been able to touch him," Hagen said. "And why state investigations keep running into walls. The corruption does not start at the street level. It starts at the bench." Bryce was quiet for a moment. Then she leaned forward. Miss Dawson, I need to be very clear about what happens next. If you agree to cooperate with a federal investigation, you will eventually be asked to testify in open court, under oath, in front of Wade Schofield and his attorneys. They will challenge your credibility. They will use your age, your housing status, your lack of documentation. They will try to make you look unreliable. I know what I look like, Wren said. I also know what I saw. Bryce studied her for a long time. The cafeteria hummed around them. Somewhere a tray clattered. Hagen, Bryce said without looking away from Wren, get me everything state has on Schofield's financial activity and reach out to the FBI field office in Billings. I want a forensic accountant on those real estate transactions by end of week. She stood up. Miss Dawson, do not leave town. Do not contact Schofield or anyone connected to him. Do not discuss this with anyone outside your immediate circle, and keep that phone charged. She left the cafeteria with the same pace she had entered, unhurried and precise, the briefcase swinging slightly at her side. Hagen lingered. He looked at Wren across the table. You understand what you just started, he said. Yes. And you are okay with that. Wren picked up the phone and put it in her pocket. Trooper Hagen, the man who killed my father, is walking around Billings buying strip malls with laundered money while a judge he owns makes sure nobody asks questions. No, I am not okay with that. That is why I called you. Hagen nodded once. Then he put his hat on and walked out. Wren sat alone in the cafeteria for 5 minutes. The overhead lights buzzed. A custodian pushed a mop across the far corner of the floor. She looked at her reflection in the dark window beside her, a girl in a flannel shirt and borrowed boots, sitting in a hospital cafeteria in a town she had never planned to visit, holding a phone full of evidence against a man who had already killed once to keep his secrets buried. She did not feel brave. Brave was a word for people in movies. She felt awake. Awake in a way she had not been in years, like every nerve was tuned to a frequency she had been deaf to before. She went back to work. The next 2 weeks moved in a rhythm that felt almost normal, which was the most disorienting part. She woke up in the motel room. She walked across the parking lot to the shop. She changed oil and replaced brake pads and learned how to balance a wheel on the ancient machine in Bay 2 that vibrated so hard the bolts on the floor had loosened over the years. She ate meals at the diner 3 blocks south where the waitress had started remembering her order without being told. Flint gave her Graves' files on a Wednesday evening, a cardboard box taped shut heavy. She carried it to the motel room and spread the contents across the bed. Bank statements, property records, photocopied deposit slips, a handwritten ledger that tracked cash payments to an entity called Ridgeline Holdings, LLC, which Grave had traced through 3 shell companies to an account controlled by Wade Schofield. Dates, amounts, routing numbers, 6 years of meticulous documentation assembled by a man who understood that patience was a weapon. She organized it, cross-referenced the dates against public property records she accessed on the library computer downtown, matched deposit amounts to real estate closings, built a timeline on notebook paper that she taped to the motel wall above the desk, each entry connected by lines drawn with a ballpoint pen she had taken from the shop office. When Bryce's forensic accountant arrived from the FBI field office, a quiet man named Lester with bifocals and a briefcase full of spreadsheets, Wren handed him the organized files and the timeline. He looked at the wall, at the notebook paper, at the lines connecting 6 years of transactions in a pattern that made the laundering operation visible. You did this? He asked. Library computers and a pen, Wren said. Lester sat down at the desk and began comparing her work to his own preliminary analysis. After 20 minutes, he looked up. You missed 2 transactions in April 2022, he said, but otherwise this is cleaner than most work I get from field agents. It was not a compliment. It was an observation. Wren preferred observations to compliments. Schofield made his move on a Tuesday. Wren was at the shop replacing a clutch cable on a Sportster when Flint walked in with a document in his hand and a look on his face that she had not seen before, not anger, something colder. County Court just issued an emergency custody order, Flint said, filed by the Yellowstone County Department of Family Services. They are claiming you are an unaccompanied minor living in unsafe conditions and associating with known criminal elements. They want you placed in state custody immediately. Wren set down the wrench. Her hands were black with grease. Mercer signed it. Mercer signed it. He is trying to pull me out, get me into the system where I cannot testify, where I cannot talk to Bryce. That is exactly what he is doing. She wiped her hands on a shop rag and thought. The problem was clear. The solution was less so. A county court order carried legal weight regardless of who signed it. If she ignored it, she became a fugitive. If she complied, she disappeared into a foster system she already knew was capable of losing people on purpose. Call Graves' lawyer, she said. Already did. He is filing a challenge in federal court. Conflict of interest given that Mercer is a subject of the federal investigation. He thinks he can get the order stayed, but it takes time. How much time? 24 to 48 hours. And what happens if county sends someone before that? Flint's jaw tightened. Then 30 iron wolves will be standing between you and whoever comes through that door. No, Wren said. Flint looked at her. If they show up and the club blocks them, it becomes a confrontation. It becomes footage. It becomes the story Schofield wants to tell. Dangerous bikers keeping a child from protective services. That is the narrative he needs. Flint was quiet. She could see him turning it over, testing it against his instincts. So what do you want to do? He asked. I go to Bryce tonight. I tell her what happened, and she files an emergency motion to transfer jurisdiction. If the federal court takes the case, Mercer cannot touch me. And if Bryce cannot get it done in time, Wren pulled the shop rag through her fingers, then I give my testimony early, on record, under oath, before anyone can remove me from the board. Flint stared at her for a long moment. Then he pulled out his phone and dialed. Bryce moved fast. By the next morning, the federal court had issued an order staying the county custody petition pending review. The grounds were exactly what Wren had described. Conflict of interest. The subject of a federal corruption investigation could not be allowed to use a compromised county judge to silence a material witness. Mercer fought it. His attorneys filed a response within hours, arguing that the federal court had no standing to intervene in a state child welfare matter. Bryce responded the same day with a sealed affidavit that detailed Mercer's financial connections to Schofield, including wire transfers from Ridgeline Holdings to an account in Mercer's wife's name. The stay held. Schofield now knew what was coming, and he knew who was bringing it. 2 days later, Wren found a note under the motel room door. No envelope, no signature. Just a single sheet of white paper with a typed sentence. Your father thought he was safe too. She picked it up by the edges, carried it to the shop in a plastic bag, handed it to Flint without a word. Flint looked at the note. His face went still in a way that she recognized as the expression that preceded action in men who had spent their lives choosing between patience and violence. We sweep the motel, he said. You do not sleep there tonight. I sleep there every night, Wren said. If I move, he knows he got to me. I do not give him that. Wren, put a man on the parking lot if it makes you feel better, but I am not running. Flint rubbed a hand over his beard. Then he nodded. That night, Dozer parked his bike under the motel awning and sat on the bench outside her door until morning. He did not knock. He did not speak. He just sat, a large, quiet presence between her and whatever was out there. When she opened the door at 6 to go to the shop, he was reading a paperback Western with a flashlight. Morning, he said. Morning, and she said, that was all. The trial date was set for a Thursday, 4 weeks and 2 days after a homeless girl had jumped a guardrail on I-90 and pulled a stranger out of the snow. Federal courthouse in Billings, United States versus Wade Schofield. Charges racketeering, money laundering, conspiracy to commit murder. Obstruction of justice. Co-defendant Judge Randall Mercer. Charges public corruption, conspiracy, accessory after the fact. The morning arrived cold and clear. The kind of Montana winter day where the sky is so blue it looks painted and the air is so sharp it stings the inside of your nose. Wren put on the cleanest clothes she had. The flannel shirt washed and pressed on the motel ironing board that took 3 tries to unfold. The jeans with the patched knee. The work boots that had been a dead woman's daughter's, worn soft and faithful. She looked at herself in the bathroom mirror. 17 years old. Thin enough that the flannel shirt hung off her shoulders like a flag on a still day. Hair pulled back with a rubber band from the shop. No makeup, no jewelry, nothing on her that had not been borrowed or given or found. She picked up the USB drive from the nightstand. Bryce had brought it to the motel 2 days before the trial. She had sat at the small desk and transferred each file while Wren watched, then handed the drive across the table and said, "Do not lose this." On the drive was everything. The photographs, the logbook entries, the financial records, and one file that Wren had not known about until 3 days ago when Grave had asked Flint to bring it to her. A recording, audio only, made by Harlan Dawson and sent to Grave 8 months before his death. Wren had listened to it once alone in the motel room with the door locked and the lights off. Her father's voice was deeper than she had imagined. Steadier. He spoke for 6 minutes and 14 seconds. He described Schofield's operation in Tacoma. He named names. He described the night he had been shot and the badge number of the man who pulled the trigger. He described the threats Schofield had made when Harlan refused to stay silent. And at the end, in a voice that cracked, for the first time he said something that was not evidence. "If anything happens to me, Danny makes sure my girl knows I did not leave because I wanted to. I left because staying would have gotten her killed. She will not understand that. Not for a long time. Maybe not ever. But I need someone to know that every day I woke up in a place she was not. It was the hardest thing I have ever done. Harder than the bullet. Harder than the disappearing. Just waking up and knowing she is out there somewhere, and I cannot hold her." Wren had sat in the dark for a long time after the recording ended. She did not cry. She had made a decision about that a long time ago. But she held the phone against her chest, and she breathed slow and deliberate, and she let the sound of his voice settle into the places inside her that had been empty since she was old enough to understand what empty meant. Now the USB drive sat in her palm, light and small and heavier than it looked, containing a dead man's testimony and a living man's evidence, and the future of a girl who had not believed she had one until 4 weeks ago. She put it in her pocket and walked out the door. The courthouse parking lot held 30 motorcycles, chrome shining in the cold sun. The Iron Wolves had come in their cuts, cleaned and pressed. No bandanas, no sunglasses. Grave was among them, standing for the first time since the crash, leaning on a cane that looked like it had been carved from a single piece of oak. His leg was braced, his face was drawn, but he was vertical, and the men around him drew something from that the way a compass draws from north. Flint walked beside Wren as they approached the courthouse steps. "You ready?" he asked. "No," she said, "but I am going anyway." Inside the courtroom smelled like floor wax and old wood, rows of benches in dark mahogany, a judge's bench elevated at the front, flanked by flags. The seal of the United States District Court for the District of Montana mounted on the wall behind the chair where the judge would sit. The gallery filled slowly. Iron Wolves on the left side, 30 men in leather, sitting in rows with their hands on their knees. No noise, no movement, just presence. On the right side, Schofield's people. 2 attorneys in suits that cost more than Wren had earned in her life. A handful of associates who looked like they had been told to dress for church. And Schofield himself. Wren saw him for the first time when he was led in through a side door. 53 years old, gray hair cropped short, a face that was handsome in the way that certain predators are handsome, symmetrical, and clean, and utterly without warmth. He wore a charcoal suit and a white shirt and no tie, as if appearing slightly casual might make him appear slightly human. His eyes swept the courtroom. They passed over the bikers without interest. They stopped on Wren. She held his gaze. 3 seconds. 4. She did not blink, and she did not look away, and she did not flinch. She just let him see her. A girl in a flannel shirt with oil-stained hands and a USB drive in her pocket, and her father's face, and her father's refusal to stay quiet. Schofield looked away first. Judge Calloway took the bench. Not Mercer. Federal appointment, Northern District, brought in from Great Falls to avoid any taint of local corruption. A woman in her 60s with silver hair and reading glasses, and a voice that could quiet a room without raising itself above conversation. "This court is now in session," she said. "United States versus Wade Schofield and Randall Mercer. Ms. Bryce, is the government ready to proceed?" "We are, Your Honor." Defense, Schofield's lead attorney stood, a tall man with a narrow face and manicured hands. "Ready, Your Honor." Bryce called her witnesses in an order that built like a stone wall, 1 block at a time. The FBI forensic accountant laid out the money trail. Shell companies, structured deposits, wire transfers that moved through 4 states before landing in accounts Schofield controlled. Lester was methodical and dry and devastating, and by the time he stepped down, the financial architecture of the operation was visible to everyone in the room. A former county clerk testified about property records that had been altered. A bank compliance officer described suspicious activity reports that were filed and then withdrawn under pressure. Hagen took the stand and described the crime scene on I-90, the severed brake line, the SUV, the pattern of evidence that pointed to premeditation. Priest testified. He had taken a cooperation agreement and he sat in the witness box with the hollow look of a man who had traded his future for a shorter sentence. He described Schofield's orders, the brake line, the rally, the SUV that was supposed to confirm the kill. He named Mercer as the man who made legal problems disappear. Schofield's attorney cross-examined each witness. He was skilled. He found inconsistencies. He challenged timelines. He questioned motives. He did what defense attorneys do, which is to take a clear picture and blur it around the edges until the jury is not sure what they are looking at anymore. Then Bryce stood up. The government calls Wren Dawson. Wren rose from her seat. The courtroom shifted. 30 bikers watched her walk forward. Schofield's attorneys watched her. Schofield watched her. Judge Calloway watched her over the rims of her reading glasses. The walk from the gallery to the witness stand was 22 steps. Wren counted them. Not because counting calmed her, but because counting was a habit she had developed in foster homes when she needed to measure the distance between herself and the nearest exit. She sat down. The chair was hard. The microphone was close. The clerk administered the oath. Wren raised her right hand. The skin on her palm was still stained with motorcycle grease that no amount of scrubbing had fully removed. "Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?" "I do." Bryce approached the stand. "Miss Dawson, please tell the court what happened on the night of January 14th on Interstate 90 outside Billings, Montana." Wren told it. Not the way she had told it to Hagen in a hospital room at 2 in the morning. Not the way she had told it to Bryce in a cafeteria with bad lighting. She told it the way she had learned to tell things that mattered. Without decoration, without performance. Just a chain of events laid out like tools on a workbench, each one where it belonged. The skid marks, the guardrail, the sound of a man calling for help in a ditch, the jump, the bike, the brake line severed clean. "And what did you do when you discovered the brake line had been cut?" "I photographed it, 3 angles before anyone touched the wreck." "Why by saying?" "Because evidence disappears. I have seen it happen." Bryce introduced the photographs, then the logbook entries, then the purchase orders, each piece handed to the jury like a brick placed on a scale. "Miss Dawson, do you know why Wade Schofield wanted Daniel Harmon dead?" "Because Mr. Harmon had 6 years of documentation proving that Schofield was laundering money through commercial real estate in Billings. And because Schofield knew that if that documentation reached a federal courtroom, his operation and the judge protecting it would be finished." "And your father, Harlan Dawson, what was his connection to the defendant?" The question found the place inside her where the recording lived. She held it. She did not fight it or hide it. "My father witnessed Schofield's criminal activity in Tacoma 15 years ago. He was shot by one of Schofield's associates for refusing to stay silent. He survived and was relocated by the Iron Wolves Motorcycle Club to protect his family. 3 years ago, Schofield found him and had him killed in a staged car accident outside Spokane." The courtroom was quiet. The kind of quiet that is not empty, but full press, tight with the weight of what has been said. "Miss Dawson, do you have any additional evidence regarding your father's knowledge of the defendant's activities?" "I do." Wren reached into her pocket and produced the USB drive. She held it up so the jury could see it. Small, black, heavier than it looked. "On this drive is an audio recording made by my father, Harlan Dawson, approximately 8 months before his death. He sent it to Daniel Harmon as a safeguard. In the recording, he describes in detail the defendant's criminal operation, the identities of those involved, and the threats made against his life." Bryce entered the drive into evidence. The courtroom clerk connected it to the audio system. Judge Calloway nodded. Harlan Dawson's voice filled the courtroom. Deep, steady, the voice of a man who knew he was speaking into a void and hoped that somewhere on the other side someone would hear. He spoke for 6 minutes and 14 seconds. He named Schofield. He named the badge. He named the operation. He described the night in Tacoma and the bullet. and the choice he had made to disappear so that his family could survive. And at the end, in a voice that broke for the first and only time, he spoke to his daughter. Ren sat in the witness chair and listened to her father's voice say the words she had heard once before in the dark of a motel room. That he did not leave because he wanted to. That he left because staying would have gotten her killed. That every morning he woke up without her was the hardest thing he had ever done. She did not cry, her face held, her hands were still on the arms of the witness chair. But the jury did not hold. A woman in the front row pressed a hand to her mouth. A man in the back took off his glasses and wiped them on his tie. The foreman stared at the table in front of him as if the wood grain contained something he needed to read. The recording ended. Silence filled the room like water filling a vessel. Schofield's attorney stood for cross-examination. He buttoned his jacket. He approached the stand. "Miss Dawson," he said, "you are 17 years old." "Yes." "You are currently homeless." "I have a room." "Provided by the Iron Wolves Motorcycle Club." "Provided by people who did not leave me on a highway." "You have no permanent address, no legal guardian, no high school diploma. Is that correct?" "That is correct." "And yet you expect this jury to believe that you, a minor with no fixed address and no formal education, single-handedly uncovered a conspiracy involving a former law enforcement officer and a sitting county judge." Ren looked at him. She looked at him the way she had looked at every adult who had ever underestimated her, which was every adult she had ever met. "I did not single-handedly do anything," she said. "I found a man in a ditch, and I helped him. I saw a brake line that was cut, and I took a photograph. I heard a phone call I was not supposed to hear, and I remembered what was said. I found purchase orders in a logbook, and I wrote down what they showed. None of that required a diploma. It required paying attention. And I have been paying attention my whole life because when nobody is watching out for you, you learn to watch out for yourself." The attorney paused. He looked at the jury. The jury looked at Ren. He had no further questions. Bryce rested the government's case. The defense called its witnesses. Character references, a financial expert who offered alternative explanations for the money trail. Schofield himself took the stand and spoke in the measured tones of a man who had rehearsed his innocence until it fit like a tailored suit. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. They returned at 6:17 in the evening. The foreman stood. The courtroom held its breath. Guilty, all counts. Schofield and Mercer both. The sound that moved through the gallery was not a cheer. It was an exhale. 30 men in leather releasing something they had carried for a long time. Flint closed his eyes. Stitch put his face in his hands. Grave gripped his cane with both hands and bowed his head, and Wren could not tell if he was praying or just trying to breathe. Schofield did not react. He sat at the defense table and stared at the wall behind the judge's bench with the flat expression of a man who had always believed he was above consequence and was now discovering in real time that he was not. Judge Calloway scheduled sentencing for 30 days out. Court adjourned. Wren walked out of the courthouse into Montana evening. The sky was fading from blue to purple along the western horizon. The air was cold and clean, and it filled her lungs like the first breath after a long time underwater. The Iron Wolves stood on the courthouse steps, not in formation, not making a display, just standing there the way men stand when something that needed doing has been done. Grave reached her first. He stood with the cane, his bad leg braced his face, carrying every one of his years, and something else now, something lighter. He put his hand on her shoulder. The weight of it was familiar now, not a trap, not a burden, an anchor. "Your father walked into the dark so you could stand in the light," he said, "and today you stood in it." Words would not come. She nodded instead. Flint appeared beside them. "What now?" he asked. "Caleb," Wren said. 2 weeks later, a silver pickup truck with Montana plates pulled into a residential street in Spokane, Washington. Flint drove. Wren sat in the passenger seat with a manila folder in her lap, containing emergency custody paperwork filed through the federal court, approved by a judge who had reviewed the case and determined that the minor child, Caleb Dawson, was living in conditions of neglect under the care of a guardian who had failed to provide basic supervision. The house was small and gray, and the front yard had not been mowed since fall. A plastic chair sat on the porch with an ashtray balanced on the arm. The curtains were drawn. Wren walked up the steps and knocked. No answer. She knocked again. The door opened. Aunt Deb stood in the frame, a cigarette in one hand and a look on her face that was equal parts irritation and confusion. "What do you want?" she said. "Caleb," Wren said. "You cannot just show up here and take him." Wren handed her the folder. Deb opened it, scanned the first page, and her face changed. Not guilt, not concern, just the expression of a person who has been told that a problem she did not want is no longer hers. "Fine," Deb said. She stepped aside. Wren walked through the house. It smelled like stale smoke and old grease. The kitchen counter held a cereal box and an empty milk carton. The television was on in the living room, playing to no one. Caleb's room was at the end of the hall. The door was closed. Wren knocked softly. "Bug," she said. "It is me." The door opened. Caleb stood there in a t-shirt that was too big for him and socks that did not match. His hair needed cutting. His eyes were enormous. "Wren," he said. "Pack your suit," she said. "We are going home." "Where is home?" She crouched down so she was level with his eyes. 8 years old. Shirt stained with something no one had bothered to wash. The same face from the photograph she had carried in her backpack across 400 miles of highway. "Montana," she said. "I have a room. I have a job. I have people who look out for me. And they are going to look out for you too." Caleb stared at her. Then he turned around and started putting things in a backpack. It took him less than 5 minutes. Everything he owned fit inside it the same way everything Wren owned had fit in hers. They walked out of the house together. Deb did not come to the door. The plastic chair on the porch was empty. The street was quiet. Caleb climbed into the truck and buckled his seatbelt. Flint started the engine. Wren sat beside her brother and looked out the window as Spokane slid past the streets she had walked, the underpasses she had slept beneath, the shelters where she had waited in line for a meal and a bed, and the chance to feel human for a few hours. She did not look back. The drive to Billings took 9 hours. Caleb slept for most of it, his head against Wren's shoulder, his breathing slow and even. Flint drove in silence, one hand on the wheel, the other resting on the armrest. The highway unspooled ahead of them, the same highway that had nearly killed her. The same highway where she had jumped a guardrail and pulled a stranger from the snow and started something she could not have imagined. They arrived in the late afternoon. The Montana sky was white and the air smelled like cold and pine. The shop was open. Dozer was in Bay 2 bent over an engine block. Stitch was at the parts counter sorting inventory. They looked up when the truck pulled in, and they saw the boy, and they nodded the way men nod when something they expected has finally arrived. Grave was sitting in a chair outside the shop office, cane leaning against the wall, a cup of coffee in his hand. He had been waiting. Wren could see it in the way he sat, patient, still. The way a man sits when he knows that the thing he has been waiting for is close. Caleb climbed out of the truck and stood in the parking lot, looking around at the motorcycles and the shop bays and the men in leather. His eyes were wide. Grave set his coffee down. He gripped his cane and stood slowly and walked toward them. Each step cost him something. Wren could see it in the set of his jaw, but he made the walk without help. He stopped in front of Caleb, looked down at the boy. Then he lowered himself carefully until he was at Caleb's eye level. "You must be Caleb," he said. Caleb nodded. "Your sister pulled me out of a snowbank," Grave said. "Saved my life. And then she did something harder. She stood up in a room full of people who did not believe a girl like her could matter, and she proved every one of them wrong." Caleb looked at Wren, then back at Grave. "Is she in trouble?" Caleb asked. Grave shook his head. "No, son, she is home." Wren stood in the Montana cold with her brother beside her and the iron wolves around her and the wide white sky above her. She touched the edge of the leather jacket Flint had given her the night they brought her in from the highway. It still did not fit. She suspected it never would not perfectly, and she suspected that was the point. Caleb reached up and took her hand. His fingers were small and warm. "Wren," he said. "Yeah, Bug. Are we staying?" She looked at the shop, at the bikes, at the men who had taught her how to use a torque wrench and balance a wheel and stand in a courtroom without shaking. At Grave, who was watching her with the same blue eyes that had found her face in a ditch on the worst night of her life and recognized something in it worth saving. "Yeah," she said. "We are staying." Grave nodded once. Then he turned and walked back toward the shop, cane tapping on the asphalt, and Wren followed him with Caleb's hand in hers, two kids who had started with nothing and ended up exactly where they were supposed to be, in a place where someone would come if they called, where someone would notice if they were gone, where 30 bikes would be on that highway before their bodies ever got cold. The sun was low over the mountains. The shop lights were on. Somewhere inside, a wrench turned and an engine caught, and the sound of it carried across the parking lot like a heartbeat, steady and mechanical and alive.